Okay, we are live. This is Senate Government Operations. It is Tuesday, January 12th, and all the committee is here along with others. I don't know if there's anybody here beyond the people that I can see, but we are allowing people to join us. And just so that people out there watching know they can join us in the room as they would in the State House, just be able to come into the room. But just coming into the room does not mean that you will be able to participate. There are some people will be asked to testify and be witnesses, but others may be in the room and not participating. So just wanted to let people know that that's the way we're operating. So committee, we have the town meeting bill that we need to finish up. I don't know if there are any questions. Brian, I did a run through of it at the Senate, at the Democratic Caucus at noon today. But everybody should have gotten the summary before that. Did you get that, Brian?
Yes, and I printed it out for my radio thing tomorrow in case there's questions there. Oh. We did have a Senate GOP caucus as well this morning. Only one person didn't attend, so the other 6 were apprised. And in fact, one of them is Richie Westman, who was on joint fiscal. So he's already well aware of it because he voted to help fund it. So I don't anticipate any problems with suspending rules tomorrow and getting it in all final stages of passage and then sending it on to the governor. Do you know whether it's reached the House floor yet?
It is there today, and my understanding, and Tucker can probably tell us, my understanding is that there some House Republicans have an amendment that they are going to propose that says active voters only will be mailed a ballot if they mail it. And I think that was, my understanding is that that's the way it would be done anyway, because that's the way the general election was. It was people who had not been challenged, active voters. So I don't know, Tucker, do you know if there is that amendment?
That amendment was not introduced on the floor, and that language exists in the underlying bill as it was introduced and amended by House GovOps anyway. The bill was passed and messaged to the Senate moments ago.
Oh, good. Okay.
128.
All right. Well, that's what I was confused by the active thing, because I didn't look at it to see if it actually said active voters, but I knew that was the intent. So I was a little bit.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I didn't mean to.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
The language says active registered voters.
Yeah. So that means
that's
they are
already
not
in the
on
bill.
They are
it's
not
already
on
in the bill. I don't know why anybody needed an amendment.
I don't know. I just heard that there was going to be one. I guess there wasn't.
Okay.
There was one individual amendment from a representative that was discussed and found unfavorable in the House Government Operations Committee, and that amendment would have required municipalities to take action. It would have changed the bill from discretionary authority to mandatory alternative procedures and told municipalities to do one or the other or a combination of both, moving the date and mailing out ballots. House GovOps found that unfavorable, and then I don't think that it was discussed on the floor, so I'm not sure if that amendment was taken back before the House convened.
But it has been passed and sent over to us. Okay, so the plan is, I guess, we can't really vote on it until we have it, but the plan is for it to hit the floor tomorrow at our 1 o'clock floor session, and then it'll come down to us. It'll come to us at 1:30 or 1:15, whenever we adjourn. And when we convene the committee, we will vote on it then. Is that everybody's understanding, Brian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, it'll be on notice probably
Yeah.
tomorrow. So we'll have to ask for a suspension of the rules to bring it off the notice calendar and take
Yep.
up immediate action. So it won't
Yes.
be, until we do that, it'll still be on notice.
Yeah. Well, no, it'll go on notice.
For tomorrow.
Okay, I'm forgetting.
I've been very confused because up until this point, the Senate has had no calendar, which I found very curious. There was
Me
never
too.
any calendar entered for the first 4 days.
But if it goes to the Senate tomorrow, it doesn't go on the calendar. It just gets referred to us. Just like a new bill that's being introduced, right? It'll go to the Senate secretary, and it doesn't appear on the calendar. It'll just be referred to us tomorrow,
That's true.
to our committee.
That's true.
Then we'll pass it and send it up. And on Thursday, it'll be on notice calendar.
Okay.
And then we have to suspend the rules.
You've got it straight, Madam Chair. I misspoke.
Whoa, boy. All right, but we do have some people here with us today who, I know that I don't see Carrie here. I know that Kendall wants to weigh in, and I don't know, I see John Odom here. I don't know if he wants to, and Gwen. So can we start with Kendall?
Sure. Thank
Hi.
you, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. For the record, Kendall Smith from Governor Scott's office. I'm the Governor's Director of Policy Development and Legislative Affairs. I want to start first by saying thank you all for the open lines of communication that we've had on this issue throughout the year, over the year and throughout the year. And I think it's been a great example of our shared willingness to listen to each other and effectively collaborate. I'm going to be really short and sweet, both for your guys' benefit and mine. I do have a 2-year-old roaming in the background. So just, again, apologies if there's any interruptions, and thank you for bearing with me, or if you hear the Lion King in the background as well. So I don't have any bombshells or any changes from what I've previously shared with committee members on this issue, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to get on the record and reiterate them. It's the governor's preference that mailing of ballots be required for this town meeting day, on the premise of making sure that all Vermonters are comfortable participating and safe when they participate. We're of course, very appreciative of the Joint Fiscal Committee allocating the funding and the resources for municipalities and school boards to choose to do that if they wish. And we thought that went very well. That being said, we aren't going to fully oppose the bill, so I just want to be clear about that. But the governor is going to continue to strongly advocate over the coming weeks that our hope is that municipalities and school boards will take advantage of the funding and the flexibility presented in the bill, to mail ballots, and that we see a strong uptake in that. And of course, we'll continue to monitor the epidemiological data and the trajectory of the virus in the state. That's really all I have. I just, again, for folks that may have not heard me say it before, wanted to make sure you were aware of the position here. Thank you for allowing me to participate in this, especially to the chair over the past weeks, and happy to take any questions, but that's really what I wanted to share with you all this morning, or sorry, this afternoon at this point.
Thank you. I will say that it has been a pretty collaborative process, and I know that the governor would prefer to have it be mandatory, but I appreciate the fact that he is not opposing the bill for that because of his preference. And I think that I have talked to a number of towns, and I think that there are a number of towns who, knowing that there are some funds available to them, are really considering doing the mail out. And I I just think that it's leaving it to their discretion is a wise choice. But that's me. Anybody else on the committee want to weigh in on this? Allison?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kendall, it's always good to see you. I guess what I'm still not clear on what if every town chose to mail ballots, what our costs would be. And I'm not sure we got a clear answer from the Secretary of State's office on that. But my concern at the moment is how are we equitably going to dole out those monies? Because $2 million does not strike me as enough to actually pay for every town mailing ballot. So one of my concerns is where, we talked about this briefly, where the money is going to come from to pay for the balance.
I can tell you what I know, and this really is the Secretary of State's area of expertise. So what I know, I'm sharing from my conversations with the Secretary and Will Senning and Chris Winters. But from our conversations with them, especially when putting together the Joint Fiscal Committee request, again, and I just want to be very clear on the record that I'm not attempting to speak for their office, was that the $2 million would cover if there was an uptake by all towns. And how that was determined was we're only reimbursing for cost over and beyond what's budgeted in order to produce and mail ballots if somebody should choose to do that. So I live in Barrytown. We already use an Australian ballot. So if Barrytown was to apply for reimbursement to the Secretary of State's office, they couldn't be reimbursed for the printing of the ballot since that's already part of their budget, but they could be reimbursed for the mailing of that ballot. So not every town would necessarily need to be reimbursed for the total production plus mailing. It would vary. Apologies. It would vary on a case-by-case basis. And that $2 million we are using from the, I apologize. She's saying the dog is eating her mac and cheese. I'm just going to ignore that. Is being allocated from CRF monies. Right. And they'll have the whole year, I believe, to submit that reimbursement request to the Secretary of State's office, given that not all votes happen at the same time. If we found that we needed more money than that, depending on how requests started rolling in, we could always work with the legislature. We assume we will potentially have some more unallocated CRF that we might be able to apply here. Right. Or we, again, since we've made this commitment, again, to communities, we could again work with the legislature to see if we need general fund or what other sources are available.
Right. And when we had this conversation with the Secretary of State, they said that would happen and we would put it in the budget if we needed to, if there was a huge uptake.
Right.
Well,
right. And
go ahead, Kendall.
Nope. You go, Chair.
Nope.
I was going to say, yes, I was just recapping that, yes. And again, that 2 million figure was something that we worked with Will Senning and again, Secretary Condos in terms of solidifying. But for more details in terms of exactly like the breakdown of that cost, you'd have to talk to their office.
Well, I think that when he testified to us, the original estimate was 1.5. And then it was up to 2 million just to make sure. And when he testified to us, he talked about in the general election, there were 440,000 ballots that were sent out and it cost $500,000 to send them out and $500,000 to have them sent back in. So that even if all the towns picked it up, and then of course there were costs on printing on those for that election. But so I think that we can rest assured that it will cover it, and if it won't, we'll deal with it as
in the budget.
Come in. Yep.
Yeah.
Any other committee members? Okay. John, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I just wanted you all to know, sounds like it probably is important to inform the conversation. Among the chatter among the clerks, there's not a whole lot of folks have weighed in on this, but there's enough to be a meaningful sample size, probably between 20 and 30 responses from towns of all different sizes, the larger municipalities, some of the smaller ones. Definitely, it looks like most of the towns and certainly most of the population then represented in that little sample are leaning away from mailing out all the ballots. So just informationally there.
Well, we won't know until a couple weeks from now, I guess, because the ballots have to be, if they're going to be mailed out by the regular town meeting date, they're going to have to be mailed out pretty soon. So, but even a town could change their meeting date and then later on decide to mail them out. They don't need to make that decision right now if they change their meeting date. So any other, Senator Rahm, did you have a?
You answered it. I was just wondering if there was more information about what they're leaning towards. Is it waiting for a date uncertain, or what are they intending to do?
I don't know. That's a select board decision, how they do that. Any other committee members with any other issues? Okay. Well, thank you. And thanks, Kendall. I hope the dog didn't eat all of her mac and cheese.
We'll find out in a minute here, but thank you all for the time this afternoon. And again, I can't say enough how much I appreciate the open lines of communication we've had on this issue.
Thank you. I hope that continues on other issues as well.
Me too.
Yeah.
Gwen, did you want to weigh in on it at all?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, no, I didn't have anything to add.
Okay.
I was just joining to see if there were any new things that popped up, but the bill got voted out out of the House as you looked at it. So,
Do you know what the vote was?
I don't. I think
Was it a voice vote?
I think it was a voice vote.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, there we are going to have our first bill.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Kendall.
Chair, I can just say that the third reading, it was a voice vote on the House floor, but the numbers were unanimous.
Oh, good. All right. Thank you. All right. So committee, with that, let us, and thanks to all the town clerks and people who weighed in and worked with us on this, because I think this was not only good communications with the governor's office, but with the VLCT and the town clerks and the Secretary of State and everybody else. I think it worked like it should. So thank you.
Now the real work begins.
Yes, I'm sure that everything we bring up this year will have the same kind of process and unanimous support and everything, don't you?
One can only hope.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay, so let us move on to we're a few minutes ahead of ourselves, but that's okay, because I see that both Larry and Julie are here to talk to us about, first of all, I should say that in doing the agenda, we have a lot of issues that we need to hear from law enforcement and from DPS and all the reports and a whole lot of other things, and from EMS and all of this. As I was doing the agenda, it seemed entirely inappropriate to ask those people to come either this week or the beginning of next week. They are so working so hard to make sure that our State House and everybody connected to it is safe, that they did not need any more pressure put on them to come to committees. So we won't be taking up those areas until the week after. So it would be the week of the 24th or something like that, whatever that week is. Does that make sense? I am sorry, we will hear from about the CARES money next week, or this on Friday, but we won't necessarily hear from DPS and law enforcement and the sheriffs and EMS and stuff about how it impacted them until the week after. Okay. I just wanted you to know why we haven't scheduled those people to come in right away, because it seemed an unnecessary pressure on them. Okay, so let's welcome Larry and Julie. Where no, I didn't.
Happy New Year.
Oh, there you are, Julie. Happy New Year. All right. Well, so we have one new committee member, Senator Rahm.
Nice to meet you.
And
You and Julie and I know each other quite well from working when she was their HR director.
oh, great. Good. Okay. So we, as you and maybe people out there who might be watching don't know, we a few years ago set up an ethics commission. There was a lot of debate about whether it was appropriate, whether it was too much, whether it was needed, whether it wasn't enough. Went back and forth, but we kind of stuck to our guns about what we thought it should be and how it should be set up to begin with. And then this last year, we asked for the commission to come up with a code of ethics. It could be statutorily adopted so that everybody who is connected to the state government is operating under the same code of ethics. We asked them there was some pressure from some people that we actually do the code of ethics last year, and instead of just asking for a report back, but we chose to ask for a report back. So that's what we're doing now, is we're going to hear the report. And I don't know if all of you printed out the entire thing, or if you even sent this, but look at this. It's about 2 inches thick. I think I used 4 reams of paper. No, not really, but it's a pretty comprehensive report, and there's everything in here. So I think, thank you very much for the work doing it. And I'll just, unless committee members have any questions or anything, I think I'll just turn it over to you to start off on the report. And we plan on doing this until 3, I believe. And then at 3:15, and if you don't want to take the whole hour, you don't have to, but we're allowing an hour for this. And then at 3 o'clock, we'll take a break, and then we're going to come back and do our committee discussion and our priorities and stuff. So take it away.
Great. Thank you very much. For the record, Larry Novins, I'm the Executive Director of the Ethics Commission. Julie Hulbert, who is the chair of the commission, is here with me. And thank you for the invitation. It's nice to see other people sometimes, and it's certainly nice to see you again. I think the last time Julie and I spoke to anybody from the legislature was on March 11th, which seems like a million years ago now. So it's nice to be back. I'll just give you a brief wrap up of what we did, excuse me, last year. At the beginning of the year, before the legislative session began, we submitted proposals for legislation, what I called in-house phase 1. And what that was some changes that we believed are necessary to the current ethics statutes to fix some of the things that are in the current statutes that really need to be tightened up. No major changes. And if you like, I can go through what some of those are. One of the things in the current statutes for executive officers is they need to submit a financial disclosure form every other year and disclose the income and money they received in the preceding 1 year. So that leaves an obvious gap of every other year. There's no reporting and no way for the public to know what sources of income people had during these off years. So one of the things we proposed was to tighten up that loophole. And then some minor, I won't go into the details, but minor language changes to allow certain language on the forms so that people are not swearing to it, but affirming, certifying that the information in there is true. Excuse me. Other things we did in that statute was to change a couple of things that are in the current statute in error. One is it talks about the Department of Human Resources Code of Ethics, and there is no such document. What should be is their personnel policy manual, and so we advocated for that change. And then a couple of wordsmithing things that I don't think we really need to go into. There were some changes on the language regarding advisory opinions, and one of the Ethics Commission adopted a while ago now a policy that we will only consider a request for an advisory opinion from the person whose conduct would be affected. So if one of you or if somebody else in state government had a question about, is it okay for me to do this or do this, then that might be the proper subject for an advisory opinion. What we do not want is for anybody in the world to come and say, I think, Senator so-and-so is doing a bad job or the governor is doing a bad job. Ethics Commission, we want you to weigh in on that. We don't think it's appropriate use of resources. I think for many reasons, it's bad policy. Our review of ethics provisions around the country show that there are no provisions, or I shouldn't say none, but I can't recall any in other states that allow just anybody off the street to ask for an ethics opinion about the propriety of an individual and government's conduct.
Larry, if I can just interrupt for 1 second.
Yes, please.
I believe that also was the intent, the original intent of the legislation. But
Right.
Unfortunately, it seemed that it was the way we said it, some people didn't understand that was the intent.
Right.
So
And we share your goal and don't want to see that happen again. We don't think the Ethics Commission should be in the position of playing gotcha. That our advice really should be prospective. And, for people who are thinking about doing something or have a question about their current conduct and they would like us to weigh in on it, then we can. But, we're not standing in judgment of what people did in the past or anybody other than the people who come to us for advice. So we hope that the language we've presented will reaffirm, I guess, what the original intent was in the original statute. So that's that. The big thing that we asked for last year, and we sort of had a two-pronged approach to this. The big thing was to ask the legislature to put into statute a requirement that the Ethics Commission would submit a draft code of ethics to be adopted into law as a statute. And at the same time, we provided you with a draft that we had late last year, early January, of where we were going. And as a result of your requests, we didn't move forward with the draft we had, but we assured you and the House Government Operations Committee that we would continue working towards drafting a statutory code of ethics, and that during the summertime, we would seek public input, public comment, and open it up to the world. And we spent a lot of time last spring and summer doing exactly that. And we have a long section in our annual report outlining the efforts we made to seek public comment. Also, if you want to check out on our webpage, we have a page on the Ethics Commission website outlining what we did last summer. Here's what we did. We spent time in the spring redrafting the Code of Ethics. I completed legal research that I was doing of the ethics rules in the other jurisdictions, almost 50 states, and the federal government. Made some changes to the proposal that we had shown you last winter, updated it, cleaned it up, And then we spent a lot of time opening it up to the public. And what we did is we sent out an email to everybody in the world that we could find, all the media in Vermont. We got everybody's lists of all the media contacts, and we sent those out to them saying, you know, the Ethics Commission is working on this project. We want to hear from as many people as possible so that we can make sure that what we send to the legislature has been vetted and reviewed. And if there are changes to be made, we can make those changes before you see them. We tried to send the email asking for public comment to everybody in state government. I was thinking, you know, we all get these emails every day about COVID. And I tried to see if we could get an email sent out that way. And for reasons that escape me, that just didn't happen. We did try. But I was given email addresses for all the heads of all the departments. And I wrote to them asking them to forward I know you're shaking your head. That's exactly my response. We did send everything to all the department heads saying, please forward these to your folks and let us know. So the word did get out, although I know from my own knowledge that there were people in state government who never saw this, at least not directly from us to them. They may have seen it in the newspaper or on radio or TV because there were stories done about it, but they didn't get it directly from us. And so we had, after we sent this notice out, we had our public hearing. Almost immediately after we sent the notice out, we began getting some comments. And I wouldn't say we got a lot of comments, but they came in regularly. And all the comments are included in our report to the legislature that we sent to you in November with the updated proposed code of ethics. But the comments we got were interesting, and they were, for the most part, very well thought out and very helpful. And some of them were surprising. There were a bunch. There's one section in the code talking about post-government employment. Yes, I'm sorry. You have a question, Senator Ram?
Yes, sorry, Larry. I've been privately seeing if Gail could track down a copy of the document from November. Did we get a proposed draft?
I sent a copy to Senator White and I think to Gail and to the whatever address it is at the legislature we're supposed to send reports to.
The report is on our website. It's under today's date.
That's the annual report. It's not a draft code of ethics.
Isn't that embedded in this report?
I don't see it embedded.
No, that went out in November to you.
I'd love to look at that while we're talking.
It's on our webpage. If you, I don't have it right in front of me at the moment.
I can forward it right now.
Thank you.
That would be great. Sorry, I thought that it was embedded in this annual report.
And I'm sorry, Larry, for some reason, I guess thought everybody got it.
Okay, my apology.
It may be. Let me search my email. Because I think
it was around the 11th or 12th of November that I sent it in. I think it was the 11th because I remember it was Veterans Day.
November 11th. I'm forwarding it to everybody.
Yeah, I don't see it.
P BC BC and KR.
And if you ever misplace the email, it's on our website.
There it goes.
And I will also post it under legislative reports for our committee.
Oh, good.
Right. Oh, that's perfect.
Thank you. So immediately we got some comments. I started to say that the section that drew the most comments in the beginning was the one on post-government employment. And interesting. And I was thinking, well, are people concerned because they're going to leave state government and they're going to go elsewhere? And I hope that's not the case because they were sort of executive branch, I would say mid-level employees, professionals. And the goal of what we sent out in that draft was not to say that they couldn't ever work in their chosen field again, but there was a waiting period for certain people and certain activities. what I realized is if you write something that's clear in your mind, and there are a lot of people who don't see it the way you do and don't see it clearly, it's a communications problem. So we redrafted that to make it work a little better. And I think we've allayed the concerns of people who were worried about what we were doing. The other sections that we received comments on and revised were the ones on conflicts of interest to make it more clear, and the sections on gifts. Excuse me, my phone is ringing. Okay.
Sorry, may I just
Yes.
interject? Jeanette, you just sent us out the annual report at 2:10. You didn't send out the report Larry sent in November.
What I sent was what he sent me on November 11th.
It says 2020 submitted annual report, and it looks like exactly like what we have on our website now.
Okay, let me go back.
I can send it to you again. I just can't do it right.
I'll send that right now.
Yeah.
It
Just
should be
send,
there shortly.
there's
It's really easy to find on the
website.
Vermont Ethics Commission website. It's
It's
really
called
clear.
submitted draft code. I just emailed that back out to everybody.
Right.
Thanks.
Is that right?
Yep, that's it.
Yeah,
And
that-
underneath it is the submitted draft code. What we did when we sent it in November is we took the code that went out, the draft that went out in July, and we annotated it so you could see all the comments we received. So you can see the evolution of where we started, and then it ends up being the code that was submitted to you in November.
Mhm.
So the idea was that anybody who wants to look at these documents on our website or anywhere else will know what we heard and see exactly what our thought process was. And then in the annotation, we talked about whether we accepted recommended changes or didn't, and our rationale for doing that. So I think the process is very clear. What was a little disappointing was, other than individuals who sent in comments, and I think there were maybe one or two comments on behalf of different agencies or departments, there was very little in terms of comments, at least from the executive branch, and only one comment from the legislative branch. So whatever comments there may be are out there, and I suppose when you take up the draft code of ethics will be the time that we'll hear those. But we certainly made every effort to try and get them and to find out what everyone's concerns were so that we could address them and make it easier for you when this process of adopting a statutory ethics code begins. So we'll see how that goes. And then just to go back to the summer, once we got all the comments, we revised the code some more, we made the changes, and then it was a rather arduous process, but it took a lot of time to get it all done and ready. And then we sent the annotated code, meaning the early one that had gone out, annotated to show comments and changes, and our final proposed code for you all to see in November. And that, I hope, will be the beginning of a discussion that can occur in this next session. One of the other things that was in the legislation last year, in addition to asking the Ethics Commission to submit a draft code of ethics, was in your bill S-198 that you voted out of committee, which asked us not only to submit a draft code of ethics, but to also submit a rough outline memorandum regarding enforcement. And we did that as well and sent that to you in November. So you have that as well. And our position last year, and this is in our annual report, is that we really strongly believe that we need a code of ethics in statute first before we can begin talking about enforcement, for lots of reasons. One is, I think it's important for people to know what's in the code, to be educated about it, to have public awareness of it, to answer all the questions, and to work out any kinks that there may be once it's adopted, and then see if and where it's not working. I have no doubt that at some point enforcement it will be and should be necessary. If people know there's never going to be enforcement, then there's no reason for them to comply. And I think the message that I would like to send out is we need an ethics code, and there's a section in our annual report outlining why we need one in statute. Let's get everybody up to speed, educated, aware of it, see where it's working and where it may not be working. And then when we have a better idea, we'll be able to determine what kind of enforcement resources we need. So my major concern is we need to see how it's going to work before we decide how much enforcement is necessary. And the other is a more practical consideration. And that is, if we start talking about enforcement now, the first question will be, what's it going to cost? And in 2021, the first time we say, what's it going to cost? I think that just puts the brakes on the whole thing. And I'm worried that it would almost be like a poison pill, that it would really be fatal. So I would love to see us adopt a code of ethics for a number of reasons. One is people come to us for advice and guidance. And what I tell them is, well, based on what we have now, this is what I think the better conduct would be. But what I have now is the ethics code that the commission adopted, which is not a rule. It hasn't been, gone through the rulemaking process, doesn't have the force of law. And I can say, well, based on what the 5 people in the ethics code and the executive director felt is an appropriate code of ethics, here's what you can do. Here's what you should do, and here's what you shouldn't do. If somebody follows our advice, there's no protection for them if their boss or someone else disagrees. Conversely, if we give somebody advice and they disregard it and just say, well, thanks for the advice, Larry, but I'm going to do what I want to do, there's no sanction. And there couldn't be unless it was the law. So every other state and the federal government has, in one form or another, a code of ethics, something that has the force of law upon which people can rely, give advice, receive advice, and if they violate it, be held accountable. So for all those reasons, we feel that the statutory code of ethics should come first. Another reason, and maybe this is, sort of pie in the sky. I remember saying last year that if ever there was a time in American history where we need to assure the public that we're acting on their behalf and acting ethically, 2020 was it. And I think 2021, the need is even greater. And so if we have a code of ethics, it will do a couple of things. One is it'll be a resource for people in state government to use so that we can make sure that our conduct complies with legal requirements, and so that we're upfront and open and transparent about what we're doing. An ethics code, in a way, is also for state employees. I think some people are afraid, well, if we have a code, I'm going to get in trouble for doing something. I think it works the other way. I think an ethics code is a shield. And if we have a clear set of guidelines and a clear set of expectations, and somebody comes to us and says, Larry, I'd like you to do a special favor for me. And I respond to them, I can't do that. The ethics code says I can't do that. That code allows me to sort of take the moral high ground, the ethical high ground, with no question about where I'm coming from, or am I being a mean person, or anything else. So it's I think of it more as a shield than a sword. But I think of most importantly, what an ethics code will do is assure the public that 1, we care, that 2, we're complying with accepted general standards of ethical comment. And good ethics in government, I think the result is we get public confidence in what we're doing. There's so much cynicism about what people in government are doing these days. They're just out for their own needs, their own good. And if we had a clear ethics code and clear ethics expectations, good education and public awareness, then I think public confidence in what we as public servants do will be increased. And for me, I think that's the number one reason to have it. I mean, the ethics, the enforcement is important, But the better education we have, the better public awareness we have, the less need there's going to be for enforcement, because more people will comply. There are always going to be a couple of people who say, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to, whatever. I'm going to do whatever I want. And those people will be able to deal with it at some point. But number one, let's improve our relationship with the people we serve and their confidence in us, and have a code that will protect us and serve their needs as well, or vice versa, depending on how you want to look at it. So that was the bulk of 2020 and the Ethics Commission's work. And when you have an opportunity, if you have time, and I know how busy you all are, to read through what we sent you in November and to read through the annual report, you'll see exactly how we got to where we are today. So let me just go through a couple other things.
I think Senator Rahm has a question.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I thought there might be a pause, so tell me if you want to address this later. But speaking of 2020 and 2021, some events in the early part of 2021, I think have made us start thinking again about what ethical behavior looks like. I just noticed in the beginning of your submitted draft code, it said something about freedom of speech and not holding an elected official accountable for what they say during legislative debate. My sense is that Congress might be rethinking that in terms of people, disregarding an election result or inciting a riot, encouraging violence. Do you see any changes you might make to what you submitted in November based on what we're seeing now? Or can you give me more nuance there about what you mean by that?
Yes, and I haven't looked, and I didn't know that we were going to get into the weeds on this today, but I mean, generally under the Constitution, whatever is said on the floor of the Senate or the House is protected to allow you to have free discourse, interchange with your comrades. It's probably not the right word, colleagues, and to speak freely without fear of repercussion. And I know you have your own internal rule that governs the content of things that you could say. I didn't think it was up. There's a constitutional issue. I don't think that somebody outside of the Senate or the House would be in a position of policing what is said on the floor. Now, if you were to say something, in a speech in Chittenden County, then that may be a different thing. But it wasn't, I think our intention in referring to that one part in the code was to say there are limited certain areas that are off limits. And that's one of them, what you say in the course of your work on the floor, in the Senate, in the House.
It's in Article 14 of the Constitution, of the Vermont Constitution. It says, the freedom of deliberation, speech, and debate in the legislature is so essential to the rights of the people that it cannot be the foundation of any accusation or prosecution, action or complaint in any other court or place whatsoever. However, there also is the section in here where we determine the behavior of our members, and we could oust somebody if we chose to for senatorial behavior or whatever, but that's also in here.
Yeah, so we wanted to recognize in the draft that we sent you the current accepted areas that are uniquely yours, and those of other people as well. Interesting. Yes, Senator Polina.
Senator Polina has a question.
This might get repetitive because I think the chair may have just already said this, but I want us to remember that my understanding is that only the Senate itself, Vermont, talking about the Vermont Constitution, the Vermont Senate, not federal.
Right.
The Vermont Constitution says only the Senate can oversee the ethics of its members. So, and only the House can oversee the ethics of its members. So the Ethics Commission can't really take action against a senator or a House member for what they did on the House or Senate floor. Only the Senate itself could do that. Am I saying that right?
It's yes. If it's for our core actions and
right.
Which voting, passing legislation, and voting.
I just think that's important for Keisha and others to remember, to understand, because we grappled with that a lot last year and the year before, saying, well, wait a minute, we're not saying we can't do anything about senators or members of the House who do something unethical. And we repeatedly told, no, you can't. And so that's why the Senate has an ethics commission of its own.
No, but the Ethics Commission can hold us responsible. It's only in relation to our core function that we can control ourselves. And our core function is passing legislation. So if we were to do things like use our position to grant special favors to people, that is not part of our core function. So the Ethics Commission has a response. There's a term for it. What is it, Larry? Do you remember the term? It's there's like 9 things listed that are. It'll come to me in a minute.
Good, because it's not coming to me.
I mean, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
While you're thinking that, for me, Anthony, this is all about our behavior outside of the legislature, outside of the State House when we're not legislating. But this is about our behavior as senators, as we go about our constituent work, as we go about our life outside of that core function. I mean, that's where this code of ethics would apply to us.
Right.
Yes.
And not having to do with passing legislation.
Is Tucker or Amarin are with us?
I thought Tucker was here earlier.
I cannot think of that term. It's a term that implies there's things like, Brian, you don't remember the term, do you?
It's not immunity.
No. It's a prohibited acts of I'll think of it.
Yeah, you're not thinking like core legislative functions or anything like that.
No, but it's the things that the Ethics Commission does have control over us about. There's like 8 or 9 very specific things that we can't take bribes, we can't use our personal, and there, Julie, you don't remember that term, do you? I'll think of it.
Where are those listed, Jeanette? Are those in our Senate rules or in our? Where would a senator find those?
Well,
some of those are in the statute that created the Ethics Commission. Sorry.
They're the same things that apply to everybody else. We don't have them in our.
Right, I got that, but I'm just curious. For example, we have a new senator here. Where would Keisha have read that?
I will find it. It isn't as if it's someplace in our rules. It's because we don't control ourselves on those issues. So it wouldn't.
Title 3, section 1201 talks about government conduct regulated by law. Is that what you were referring to?
That's it.
Yeah.
Regulated by law.
Right.
Yes.
So it's section 1201 of Title 3, subsection 5, and that would be including bribery, neglect of duty, taking illegal fees, false claims against the government, owning or being financially interested in an entity subject to a department supervision, failing to devote time to duties of office, engaging in retaliatory action, former legislator or officer serving as an advocate. So there are those things. And
that was section 1201?
1201 of Title 3, yeah.
Now that we have that lovely book given to us by our chair, we can easily and quickly reference it now, in addition to our iPads, of course.
I'm not sure what you're referring to, but
you gave us Title 3.
No, I didn't. If I gave you anything, it was Title 17.
Oh, you gave us Title 7. That's right. Sorry.
Okay.
So much for that. Forget it.
Senator Rahm.
So just to clarify, for example, if someone made false claims against the government, but they did it in the course of Senate deliberation, does that not fall under the purview of the Ethics Committee and instead fall under the jurisdiction of a Senate body regulating the ethics of its members?
I would think so, yes.
Yeah, I can't say off the top of my head. I need to look at that some more. But I mean, there's certainly conduct that if we had a statutory ethics code that would maybe add or subtract from what's in Title 3 already. And so there are other provisions, and it would be up to you to determine, to what extent those may or may not apply to you or other people in state government.
For example, the last one that you quoted there was employment I don't remember what it was, but that was passed recently. That is something that's regulated by law, because it's in the law that says that you can't, you can't be, I don't remember what it is, a lobbyist for a year after you're out of the legislature. That's regulated by law, not by anything else. So that if I were to become a lobbyist next week, I would be violating that law, and the Ethics Commission would have jurisdiction over me.
Could have, yeah.
Mhm.
Although right now, under current law, what we would do is we would take that complaint and we'd send it to the the Senate Ethics Panel. That's our limited ability right now under current law. So we really have no authority.
But you could send that one to the AG's office, because that is current
If it was a
law,
criminal
and
violation,
I'm
yes.
no longer a senator if I'm a lobbyist. So
Right.
you send it, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you want me to go.
Yeah, please, I'm sorry.
There were other things that came up in what I sent you last fall. And when you get a chance to look at it, there was discussion about whether and to what extent the ethics code might apply to people in the judicial branch, not judges. Judges are clearly outside. And because of separation of powers, there's nothing to be done for them. I spoke to Chief Justice Reiber about a year and a half ago and asked him, what do you do if there's an ethics complaint against somebody, you know, a court clerk or somebody like that? And it was unclear to the chief what it was. He said, well, speak to the court administrator. So I tried to get a hold of the court administrator and was unsuccessful. When I sent out our draft bill, our draft code of ethics for comment last summer, I heard back from them immediately, almost within a day, saying separation of powers, you can't touch. Anybody in the judicial branch, we can do our own. And I included in what I gave you last fall a memo outlining why that necessarily doesn't have to be that way. And there's lots of state law, and I haven't looked at the memo today, but there are lots of statutes where the legislature can very clearly tell the judicial branch what to do and what not to do. And so I'll refer you to that memo. My thought would be that if you had a clerk or some type of administrative person in the judicial branch who was showing preferential treatment in awarding contracts or hiring people to friends, that should be something that would come under the ethics code. And it shouldn't be we shouldn't rely on the administration in the judicial branch to remedy that. One of the problems with having the Department of Human Resources for the executive branch or having the judicial branch monitor ethics thing of their own people, it always becomes an employment issue. And it shouldn't be. It should be separate. And if somebody does something as a state employee that is an ethics violation or looks like an ethics violation, the Ethics Commission, if we ever have enforcement, it should be like if you were on your way to the Senate in the morning, or better yet, on your way home, and you got a traffic ticket, or you tossed something out the window and got a ticket for littering. Well, it's somehow related to what you do, but it's a different, it's a different thing. And so you could get a ticket, a fine for violating that law. It doesn't affect your ability to serve or to hold your office. And what I see down the road for the Ethics Commission would be something like that, that if there is enforcement, it wouldn't, we wouldn't be able to say, oh, you can no longer sit and hold your seat. You can no longer work in state government. But it'd be like, well, you've committed an ethics violation, and it's a $150 fine or whatever, whatever it is down the road when we get there. Getting back to what I was thinking about judiciary is, I think, as it is for the executive branch, if there is ethics and ethics enforcement, it should be independent of the employer-employee relationship. And I addressed that in the memo that we sent. And, the ultimate decision on whether the ethics code should apply to those people in the judicial branch, obviously will be up to you. And if you decide that it's appropriate to do that, fine. If you decide that it's not, that's your decision. But wanted to outline for you sort of what at least we saw as the arguments. We included in our packet to you the letter we got from Judiciary saying why they felt the code shouldn't apply to them. And then I put in my memo why I thought it could. And if necessary, we could add to that. But it's an interesting conversation. It's interesting to think about. We had that. Let me look at my other notes here that I had. But let's see. In terms of the day-to-day operation of the Ethics Commission, to the extent you want to move away from talking about a code right now, we're hobbling along. In our annual report, we put in a section about the only person employed by the Ethics Commission is me, part-time. So if you ever want to have a meeting with our IT people, call me. If you ever want to have a meeting with the people who run our website, call me. If you ever want to talk to the people who do the typing for the annual report, I'm your guy. So one of the things we asked for in the legislation we proposed last year and was part of H634 was to allow us to have a position for administrative assistance. And whether and to what extent we get money for that, who knows? But at least if we were in the statute that, dollars permitting, we could do that, it might make a big difference. There have been times when I just can't keep up within the strictures. Senator Collmore, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Larry, and it's great to see you again.
Good to see you.
What kind of money are we talking about for that?
Between $12 and $14 million a month. No, right now our whole budget is $113,000. That's our annual budget for the entire commission for the whole year. If we had a part-time person, I don't even know what that would be, what that would look like. They've already done the work for next year's budget. If they said you could have somebody for 20 hours a week, I have no idea what that would look like, but it would certainly be less. I mean, if 113,000 covers our entire commission, and the majority of that is my salary and benefits, I'm thinking it couldn't be that much. I mean, we're talking, tens
50?
of thousands, 50, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Senator, I'd guess that it would be somewhere around $60,000 for a part-time person, including whatever benefits are. And that's a guess, whatever benefits would be applied to that person.
And despite the year being very, very difficult to find any sort of new funding, that figure, I'm pretty sure, would not be insurmountable.
That's music to my ears. Yeah.
Just one man's opinion.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
A lot of it will depend on where we go. If we have additional responsibilities, if it looks like we're going to be doing more, then the way we're carrying on now will be just impossible.
But even you, not even thinking about enforcement or anything here, but just the education part of it. I mean, that you made a big point about talking about how even if we have one, what we need to do is we need to make sure everybody is aware of it and educated around it. So that's a huge responsibility, and I can see that would be.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Senator Clarkson.
Thank you. It's not only a huge responsibility to tag on to the education piece, it's also a big cost. It's not a huge cost, but to actually do an education, a systematic education for all these bodies, that's going to also cost a bit to be designed and to roll out. But I think what I'd like to ask is our next action steps. You have presented us with a draft code of ethics that you have had feedback on, you've had public hearings on, you're ready to rock and roll with it.
Absolutely.
Are you hoping that we will introduce that as a committee bill? How are you hoping that we go forward with this?
I I don't know. I mean, if it were a committee bill, that would, I would imagine, would be the quickest way to get it out there. We didn't send it to you as a bill looking for a sponsor. We sent it to you because that was what we understood our responsibility was under two bills that, had they become law, would have told us to do that. So if it were a committee bill, that would be ideal.
I actually think that it would be better to have it introduced as a bill than a committee bill, because when you have a committee bill, you don't have the bill for people to react to until you've finished the bill. I mean, there's only drafts. There's nothing there for people to react to. So if we had a bill that was introduced and sponsored and had a number, then people have something to respond to and something to react to, and we can get a lot of testimony.
So that's great feedback. I'd be happy to sponsor that bill with whomever else on this committee would like to sponsor it. And maybe we could individually join together and sponsor it, but which makes it sort of a committee bill, but not really. It would be great to get it introduced, because I think that's our next step, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let's, yeah.
And we know that bills never remain the way they are introduced. So there will be, but I do believe that that's the best way to get input from people and responses and testimony. Senator Rahm, did you?
I may have been the one who originally interrupted before Larry got to this part, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about the public process and any gaps you feel like there might be in who you heard from. If we do take testimony, that can be another form of public engagement, but where do you feel like you missed some voices, or how that went?
I think we got to a majority of people in state government. I don't think we got beyond, I don't know that we got to anybody in the judicial branch below the court administrator's office. So there are a lot of people out there, and I just don't know. I suspect they never heard about it. I know two people who work for a judicial branch. I don't think they heard about it, at least not through the state of Vermont auspices. So that's one area. Whether the code applies to some people in the judicial branch or not, there's a large number of people who work there who are state employees who would probably have valid ideas and comments about the requirements that we all should, be meeting. And so I would like to hear from them. The Department of Human Resources didn't give anything formal. I had a couple of informal chats with people, but the message I got is, well, when it comes up as a bill, then we'll chime in then. And I didn't hear from, I think I heard from the Public Utilities Commission, and their comment is included in what we sent you. They said that they should not be subject to the ethics code because they have their own individual requirements. We felt that probably wouldn't carry the day. And then the executive branch as a whole, I know that Governor Scott and then Lieutenant Governor Zuckerman and all the statewide officers last February, sent Senator White and Senator Copeland-Hanses at House Government Operations a letter indicating their support for a statewide code of ethics. So I don't know about the particulars of what we have, but certainly the current statewide officers, except for Molly Gray, who I just haven't approached and haven't heard from, they all support a statutory code of ethics. So I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who will want to be heard from. I think we did the very best we could to get to everybody we could. I mean, I could share with you the list of people we sent these things to, the media. I mean, it's like 70 or 80 different addresses that we sent them to. So I'm sure there will be comments out there that we haven't heard before, but I don't know any better way to get as far as we have without, and be able to get other comments.
I think
Just to add, I would also, say state employees were the biggest gap that we really didn't, I don't know that we could say that we really reached everyone or that it was available to everyone.
Yeah.
I
So,
think
Julie, sorry, did you say was the biggest gap?
State employees.
Oh, state. Well,
think we talked about the reaching the public and stuff. I was less concerned about reaching people who actually work for state employees or elected officials, or I was more concerned about hearing from those people out there who wonder if we are ethical or not. And I know that when we had planned a public hearing, the Campaign for Vermont and VPIRG and a lot of the media outlets and stuff were going to promote it. We had it set up that we were going to have it at Vermont Law School. And so I think that once we have something, that all of those groups will get cranked up and get their members out, and the media will get people out. So I'm less concerned about the state employees and the elected officials, because we will hear from them.
Yeah. We did get comments from VPIRG, and they attended our public hearing, and their comments are included in the packet we sent you. I think that, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
no, then I think let's get it introduced, and let's get that public hearing. And the VSEA could have sent it out to all its members without any difficulty. I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, it strikes me that they could have sent it out to every member and gotten comments back.
It did get a little bit, people got a little preoccupied with other things like the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that there probably was people sitting there saying, oh my God, I have to figure out how I'm working at home and keeping my 2-year-old dog from eating her mac and cheese. So I'm not going to worry about this ethics thing until it actually is a reality.
Right. We did send them notice, the state employees union. We sent them notice, and I actually talked to, now I'm drawing a blank on his name. I want to say Steve.
Steve Howard.
Steve Howard, a couple times. And they said, well, we'll wait until it gets to the legislature before we comment. So.
Okay, well, let's get it to the legislature and get comment. I mean, I'm happy to send it to Tucker. I mean, let's get it to Tucker and go.
I'm happy to co-sponsor.
Great. Let's do it. Tucker, I assume, is the person to send it to?
I don't know if it's Tucker or Amarin.
I'll ask Tucker and we can start there.
Or what I tend to do, if I'm not sure, is I send it to Luke. And he gets the right person. But
it is the kind of thing Betsy has been working on.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Right, so Amarin is probably the person to.
I think so. She's been doing the other election bills.
Okay.
Well, that's music to my ears.
Thanks.
Yeah. I don't know if you have any other questions. I'm looking through my notes because I wasn't prepared to go into details about the proposed ethics code, but obviously, well, you don't know where to find me, but emails get to me, and I'm happy to show up whenever there are questions. Do that, or if individually, if you have any questions or want to pick my brain, I'm happy to make myself available whenever you wish. You know, we put obviously a lot of thought into this, and I don't think any of us believes that what we sent you is the end all be all of ethics codes, but I think it's a great starting point. And I think we've covered the big points. You know, there no doubt will be some things that get changed, and we certainly anticipate that, but having something and taking a big step forward is our immediate goal. And I think having a code in statute will be a big, will make a big difference for all of us. I think it'll be a great thing. So
I
happy to
do
be
have
part
one
of that.
question about a term. I mean, I think that once we get this into a bill form, there will be lots of questions, and then people will look at it and say, oh my goodness, $20, is that really what they mean? Is $20? Shouldn't it be $40? Or, I mean, those kinds of things. But I do have a question about not considered gifts. Is a device or inheritance? What on earth is a device?
So if I die and leave you $10,000 in my will, something like a device. So, you know, that's what, I mean, it's one of those terms of art that only lawyers know, I think. And so a device would be something left through a testamentary disposition, through a will or a trust, something like that.
Oh, okay.
So where the donor has to die,
okay,
in order for you to get it. So I think there's less likelihood I'm going to profit from it in the long run.
I thought maybe it referred to Joe Benning's motorcycle.
Oh,
You know, that kind of device. I guess that's spelled with
yeah,
a
no. So
Any other questions, committee?
I don't have a question, but if you're taking names, I would be a sponsor of that bill as well, if you're taking names.
I would as well.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for all the work you've put in on this. It really was monumental. And for the report that you sent, I mean, it's very comprehensive and leaves no questions, only agreements or disagreements.
Thank you. Thank you. I was shocked when you printed it out, how big it was. And I haven't printed it out. I've only been looking at it on my computer. It reminds me of something that somebody said when I was in law school, completely off subject, but they said, kill a lawyer, save a tree. So I would imagine for the most part, we'll be dealing with electronic versions, but for writing it up and scribbling it and doing that for my money, nothing beats pen and paper. So.
Well, I think that once we get the bill, the draft bill in here is only about 6 pages.
Yeah. That's the
all the rest of the stuff that's there. And I had no idea how much I was printing. I just hit print and then walked away and was surprised.
I feel, Senator, like we're the little commission that could. So we will keep working because we know that this is important. So we've put all our effort into it in 2020.
Well, I think this committee, or me anyway, feels very, this is going to sound pretty awful, but kind of motherly about the Ethics Commission and the Racial Equity Advisory Panel, because we're the committee that formed those two. And so I anyway feel some kind of parental responsibility for making sure that you're able to operate.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Allison? Oh.
I agree. I agree. We have a vested interest and happily fewer birthing pains, but actually there've been quite a few birthing pains on this one.
Okay. Thank you so much. Any more questions or comments or anything for Larry or Julie?
Right. Well, thank you. It's great to see you all again. And hopefully we'll see you in the not too distant future.
And Julie, I think that what we'll do is double your salary.
Sounds great. As long as you don't fire me from my volunteer job.
Yeah.
Well, but that does lend itself to a question, which is when the commissioners meet, are their per diems taken a part of your annual budget?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No, you're kidding. Oh, that makes it even worse.
That
and their
happens.
mileage
That is true
back in the days when we had in-person meetings. Yeah.
That is true with every board and commission.
Right. You're our whiz on this. Yeah. Well, I definitely think we need to address this. We create things and then we need to fund them, as we need to do with our racial equity
advisory panel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay.
I'm
I
going
know
to
you're
get
just
back to work.
dying to
We'll
stay.
watch the live stream.
Oh,
Oh.
yeah, right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Trying
Bye-bye.
to find here now where my, I think we're scheduled to take a break at 3. Do people feel that they would like to take a break, or do you want to just plod on? And,
I'd like to
Either way.
stand up. I could
okay,
do
let's
it
take a,
standing
like
up.
let's take a 10-minute break. We'll be back
Yeah,
here
that-
like
and-
10
and
after.
I sent off the drafting request to Tucker and Emeren.
Okay, let's be back here at between 5 and 10 after. So I think, Gail, you put up a little thing that says we're on break.
I will, and I'd like to ask you to mute your microphones and take yourself off of video. And we'll see you in 15 minutes.
I see you're back, Brian.
Yes. I think we all are, except for Senator Polina. There we go.
All right. So we are back. So I think that we talked about having committee discussion, talking about our priorities, what some of those might be. So let me, and then there are some housekeeping things that Gail wants to share with us. So what I will say is that the way we're going to try and, I think, stick to the same schedule that we had last year, so that on Tuesdays we meet at 1:30. That gives people, I don't know if the Republicans caucus at noon on Tuesdays or not, but the Democrats do, and it gives time to and then for anybody who goes to any of those other caucus things that usually meet at noon. And then Wednesday and Thursday would be after the floor. And that right now, that'll be probably 1:30. I mean, it won't be late. As we go on in the session, it'll get later. And then Fridays, we're on the floor at 11:30, and we can meet at 1 or 1:30, whichever you prefer. I would prefer doing it at 1 so that we can get out earlier, but that's up to you guys.
Sounds good.
I'm with you.
Okay. All right. So we'll just keep that schedule then that we had before. So I'm gonna, we had a chairs meeting and talked about how we were gonna have people participating. And I just mentioned it a little bit ago when we first started, but so tell me if you think this makes sense, but the way I see it is that when we're in the State House, anybody can walk into the room and watch. They have no ability necessarily to participate, but they can be there and watch. And then those people who we ask to speak to us to testify are actually on the agenda, and they have an invite also. But oftentimes, if we have time and there's some issue that we're dealing with, we ask, does anybody else in the room have anything, to add, even if if there's time. So that's the way I would like to do it this remotely also. I think that's the way Ag is going to be doing it also, so that anybody who wants to be in the room can get an invite. So they'll be in the room with us, but only those people who we have asked to be witnesses will be speaking to us. Does that make sense? Brian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, it does. And Senator Starr did broach the subject with Senator Polina and I this morning. I guess the only question I have is, how would people receive the invitation? In other words, if you're physically in the building, you can just walk into the room. You don't have to ask anybody. You don't have to check in with anybody. You take a look at it, and I see people do it all the time, at the agenda, which is hanging on the door outside. And if they think, oh, that might be interesting, let's go in and watch that for a while. So it would take a little bit more coordination, I think, with the general public to know ahead of time that they want to be in a particular committee room. And then they'd have to ask the committee assistant, I guess, to provide them with a Zoom invitation, right?
I don't think they should have to ask. I actually think that the invite should be on the agenda.
Oh.
So
Okay.
anybody who looked at the agenda would see a link to the meeting?
Yep.
So how would we prevent that Zoom bombing that happened to our committee?
Exactly.
How many times has Zoom bombing happened in
Just that one.
all the meetings that we've had?
Just that
Just the
one.
one time.
Once.
Just that one, but we have not published the Zoom link. They've been very carefully protecting the Zoom link for each of us so that, yeah, I agree. I have concerns about just publishing it on the agenda. It's one thing to request it so that you know who it is. It's another thing to, I mean, remember that anyone who comes into the State House is looked at and reviewed by the Capitol Police. They get eyes on them. It is not like just, you know, there's more care for our safety and than just willy-nilly. So I think that I have concerns about people not having to ask to participate and, you know, and then be invited, but to not know the person, to not be able to contact trace in case anything happens is to me a concern.
Well, I understand that. I'm not sure. I think that it's asking a lot of Gail to have everybody contact her who might want to, and they're not being asked to participate. They're not participating. They're in the room. That doesn't mean they have the right to participate. I control who participates. Keisha.
I don't want to speak for Gail, but it's actually also a lot of pressure and takes a lot of time during the meeting to monitor, to see who's coming in and make sure they're a safe person. So there should be at least a lot of disclaimer language. I mean, I try to do some public Zooms, maybe we all did during our campaigns, but it was very clear you had to identify yourself. You know, it often, I still think it helps if we have a sense of who wants to come in before that, because if someone tries to come in without a name that's, you know, a full recognizable name of some sort, it's a huge red flag. Even if they come in with a name, you know, Gail's going to have to monitor to make sure they don't try to put up disruptive images or, you know, even if they're muted. But it's actually a lot to ask, I think, of Gail to do it safely while trying to run the committee as well, just from having done this myself and been Zoom bombed in other forums when we're discussing race and other issues.
Gail.
So this is something that is being talked about by leadership. I am getting requests from different state departments to have an open invitation so that they can just drop in as needed. And I know leadership is talking about it, but I'm not sure where that they are at. Was Peggy at your chair's meeting? Have they weighed in on it at all? Okay.
No, we talked about it and talked about how do we make it the most transparent to people, because people can watch on YouTube, that's true. But I don't know. I want to make it as easy for people and as easy for Gail as possible for people to participate. Anthony, here's another thing. I'm going to try, because we are on YouTube and because it's so public, I'm going to try my hardest to refer to you as Senator Polina, not just you.
Oh,
I'm
my
going to refer
goodness.
to Senator Rahm as Senator Polina also.
Could you address me as the Honorable?
Oh, yes. Okay. The Honorable Polina.
You know, I want to keep it as open as possible as well. Just another thought that I wonder about is if we invited everybody to come in, you know, on the iPad, I see 9 or 12 people at a time, let's say. That means every room would be crowded necessarily. It might be, you know, 40 people in the room, which make it harder for you to know where we are. In other words, I may not be on the same screen with you anymore. I may be sort of on the next screen. It just seems that would just be an added dilemma. It's just saying, I like the idea of keeping it as open as possible, but it might be hard for you to identify who you want to call on if there's like 40 people in the room. 40 might be an exaggeration.
I would only call on people who've been asked to testify. Just because somebody's in the room doesn't mean I'm going to even acknowledge their presence.
That's true. Okay.
We don't when we're in the committee rooms.
But if they're not muted, they can just speak up though too.
Right.
I don't want to get into like thinking about all the negatives that could happen, because I think it actually is a good idea to try to find ways for people to participate. It's just that these got to sort of like work through these dilemmas.
Well, what is the best way to do this? If somebody sees that there's something on our agenda then they have to ask Gail if they can have an invite. And then Gail is responsible for sending them an invite. And then people come in and out because we have different items on the agenda. So she's going to have to be watching for people to come in and out and figure out who they are and whether she should let them in. I think she should just let them in.
Well, if somebody's monitoring who's muting them, I mean, if it does require some management to keep everybody who's not an acknowledged participant muted. That requires some management too.
Well, I'm not so sure that we did. It seems to me that in when we were meeting over the summer and fall, that if somebody wanted an invite, we sent them an invite. And I don't remember having a lot of problems with people disrupting or speaking out of turn or.
Right, but they requested to be.
Right, they requested to come in, but we let them in.
But did
Right.
people
who they
even
were.
know that the legislature was meeting at that point? I think a lot of people were not paying attention too, because they didn't expect the legislature to be meeting at that point.
Well, I don't know. What's the best way to do this?
Well, we could also do it the way you're saying, and then if it becomes a problem, we could change course and just make it clear that we're willing to leave it as open as possible, but people have to respect the members who are speaking.
Senator Rahm?
I have to say, I really don't want to do this before January 20th with everything going on in the state. I don't know if you've been Zoom bombed where someone's sending you private messages that are lewd or threatening. I have had that experience and it makes it really difficult to do your work. And I just really worry that someone could look very benign in the meeting and be private messaging someone, and that could do a lot of damage to them before we know what's happening. That exact experience has happened to me on a forum about racism in the state. And I just am really nervous about experimenting with this right now, particularly.
What do you mean private messaging?
Sending you a private chat message on the side.
Yeah, once they're in the meeting, they can do a lot of stuff. I mean, they can chat, they
could change their screen and put up a lewd image or put up a protest image, or, not to say that people shouldn't have free speech, but a lot could happen right now. And I don't think it's safe.
I would think that would be true for all committees until after the 20th. I would not do this.
I don't necessarily know what's going to change after the 20th, though. If someone is intent on, causing disruption, I mean, I understand what's happening on the 20th, don't get me wrong, but I don't think after that prevents anybody from doing it. And the more we talk about it, I think I'm agreeing with Senator Polina that maybe we should just try it and see what happens. And if it doesn't work, we can do something different.
Well, I'm willing to just, the 20th is next Wednesday, right?
Yep.
So for this week, I mean, we've already published the agenda for this week and it's there. And if somebody wants to get an invite, they can contact Gail or me and we'll just send them an invite. And next Tuesday and Wednesday, and I don't know I haven't even thought about scheduling anything for next Wednesday yet, because I don't know if there's going to be any suggestions from leadership about what we do or what we don't do on Wednesday. I don't know. Do we treat it just as another day, or do we take some precautionary methods? I don't know. But I haven't heard anything. So, and then starting the week after that, let's open it up and then see what happens. Does that make any sense, Gail?
I have a suggestion. I plan the Zoom meetings ahead of time. So I put in meetings for all 4 days of the week. If I were to provide you all with all of those Zoom links, and people could contact you if they wanted to join the meeting, and you could share the invitation with them. They could also contact me as well. Would that be amenable?
So if somebody wanted it, yeah, as long as they're just there to observe, that doesn't mean they have the right to participate.
So everybody in this committee would have all of the invitations for the week. And if they were asked by somebody to join the committee on one day or another, they could just share that invitation.
So are you saying, Gail, that there's a different Zoom link for each day? Oh, wow. So there's 5 more emails I got to keep track of. And
No, it would all be on one email.
oh, okay.
And they started doing this. At first, we did have a single link for each committee, and they started changing it every day. And they've been really strict about it ever since agriculture got Zoom bombed.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I thought that they're starting to use what they call these recurring Zoom invitations, where like for every Tuesday that we have our caucus, it's going to be the same one.
Right.
And for every floor session, it's
the same Zoom thing. So they're not going to send out new Zoom links necessarily for those things.
That's what we've been doing anyway.
Because I was just told last week that I cannot do that.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
All right. So,
Okay, Keisha, I think have
Rob
another
had a question.
yeah.
And I would just say the only way I'm comfortable with this is if it's standard. And because just like in the legislature, we know what disruption looks like and when someone would be asked to leave. Gail has to know when that person is supposed to be asked to leave the Zoom or basically kicked out of the Zoom. And so I think we need to write that down so that we're both not violating free speech and people's ability to protest, like they might walk into our committee room with a sign, but that we know what disruption is defined as so that that person can be removed safely from our meeting. I just think that needs to be written down. I would hope it would be standard across committees, just like it would be standard in the legislature.
And you wouldn't have to stop your meeting, your conversation to point me to ask somebody to leave the meeting or to put them back in the waiting room.
Allison?
So it strikes me, I mean, I think there's a little bit of a disconnect here. If legislative council is having you, for safety reasons, have a new Zoom link every day, that seems totally counter to publicly inviting anybody on an agenda to join a meeting. I mean, they're going to extreme lengths to have an individual Zoom link for every day. That seems like they're wanting very much to control and make sure that we are protected. It strikes me that then to publicize that, it seems, I don't know why, I think there just is a disconnect there between that notion of protection and the notion of publishing to whoever looks at our legislative website, the Zoom link.
Well, how about if we did what Gail suggested until for the next week, we each have the invites. If somebody wants to enter the room, not participate, if they want to enter the room, they could ask any one of us. And if we feel comfortable, we could share the link with them.
I think that leaves a lot of room for interpretation about what makes us comfortable.
Right.
I just think a standard process is the only way to do this in a way that doesn't really cause a lot of issues.
I just don't want Gail to have to be monitoring all these people who want to come in and out. And if people want to come in for a particular part of the agenda, and then they want to leave, and then they want to come back for the next section of the agenda after this one, she's going to have to be monitoring all those people and letting them in and out and knowing who they are.
No, it's one link for each day. So
I know, but you're going to have to, if somebody if we're talking about the ethics, we're having talking about town meeting, and then we're talking about the ethics, which we just did. And now we're talking about our priorities. If somebody wants to join us for the town meeting thing, and then they don't care anything about the ethics report, but then they would like to rejoin us to listen to what we're talking about our priorities, they're going to have to go in and out, and Gail's going to have to let them in and out. And how is that? It seems to me it's a lot of work. Yeah.
And Senator White, Chairwoman, how is that different from them observing on YouTube Live?
Yeah.
Because if they're observing on YouTube Live, there is no potential for them to participate. If Brian's town clerk had come to our meeting, she could watch it on YouTube. But if she was not a participant, but if she was in the room with us, she wasn't scheduled to testify or anything, but if she was in the room with us, I could say, well, what do you think? Do you have an opinion on that? Which we often do when people are in the room with us in the State House. Even if they're not testifying, we will say, Ben, what do you think about that? Or do you have any comments? So, yeah, Senator Clarkson.
I would suggest we sleep on this. I'd suggest we think about it. It sounds like it's going to be a continuing and maybe a discussion this afternoon in chairs meeting. And it strikes me, I'd like to sort of sit on it for a while. I think that there's a level, a kind of a big range of comfort on this. And particularly given some of what's going on just statewide and nationally, I think we should sleep on it and think about it. It's the first time we thought about it. So it's always good to take some time and think about it.
Okay. So the end of that conversation, we will sleep on it. So now priorities, what do people have have you thought about what your priorities might be for this committee? Do you have any, Anthony, I see you've unmuted yourself. Senator Polina, I mean.
Madam Chair. I mean, I had a few things that I jotted down that I've been thinking about, not in any particular order. A couple of them I have my own questions about, but I mean, the Ethics Commission was one that was on my list. Mail-in voting was on my list as well. And I know that we had a little back and forth about whether to introduce the bill or not. Senator Bray seems like he's going to introduce a bill. I was going to introduce a bill and I decided not to because of the idea that the committee would take testimony before we had a bill. So I don't know what to do about that.
You should go ahead and introduce whatever you want to. Because
I think if I do, I would introduce a fairly basic bill that would just be enough to generate conversation in the committee.
Right. Well, we've already got one.
Right.
So we might as well have
2,
3, 4, 7.
Okay, I know that there'll be a bill on ranked choice voting, instant runoff voting, which would be in the committee. I know that we're going to have to grapple again with the non-citizen voting issue because it's being reintroduced in the House from the Montpelier point of view. I don't know whether Winooski or someone else passed it.
Yeah.
So we dealt with that. I say it that way because, Keisha, we dealt with that last year and we never got it to the floor. We didn't think we had the support in the Senate at the time to move it forward. I also wondered about what we have to do around the police, revisiting some of the police issues, which I'm not even sure what they are, but I know that we had a lot of things hanging out there for a while.
I'm going to make a summary of 124 of what we had in there that was passed so that we can have a report on it and what is coming back to us in terms of reporting. So I'll send that out to everybody so that we know what 124 Keisha was the Senator Rahm was the law enforcement bill. And we have a lot of reports and stuff coming back. So I started summarizing it today and didn't get very far, but I'll send that out.
I just have 2 other quick things to mention. One is I think we're going to grapple again. We passed the ban on corporate contributions in the Senate last year, but it never made it through the House. It died, I think, in government operations in the House. So that bill will be introduced again in the same way that we passed it out of the Senate last year. And then the racial, I'm going to say the name wrong, but the Racial Equity Office, that's not what I mean, but you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
We had talked about trying to give them a little more support, and I think we should revisit that as well. So that's sort of a scattering of things, in no particular order.
A lot of them are the same as on my list.
I think that's about all I have right now.
So Senator Collmore, did you?
Yeah, I think when Senator Bray was still in this committee, he indicated that he had at least an inclination to introduce a bill about curing ballots and things like that. And I was pretty clear that I thought we, at least in my view, gone as far as we could with election reform. But I'll certainly be willing to listen. One of the things that I'd like to do, and I don't know how to do it exactly, is to find a mechanism for more regularly purging the voter checklist. I don't want to put any more work on town clerks necessarily, or I guess it would actually be the, what's the board that does
CA.
that? Yeah. But I do think that the past election, we had examples of people that were deceased and had been for quite a while that were still getting mailed ballots. People that had voted in other states 2 or 3 different times and were still getting ballots. There's apparently no reciprocity between one state and another. If I leave Vermont and move somewhere and I register to vote in the new state, they're supposed to let Vermont know, but oftentimes they don't. So there's got to be a better way to do that. So I think, and I'd like to have the Secretary of State, this isn't a bill necessarily, but when they're in maybe on Thursday, give us a report about how things went, how many ballots. I know there were 44, what did I write down?
440,000.
440,000. How many, came back as undeliverable? How many were not used? All that kind of stuff.
Well, we are going to have on Thursday is going to be all things election.
Yeah.
And we will, so elections is one of the priorities that we have, whatever we end up with in terms of elections. I think that, which is why, Allison, Senator Clarkson, did you get a copy of Title 17? You said you did.
You gave us a copy. You gave us
When?
a bound copy of one of those titles. I thought it wasn't Title 3. That's the criminal statute.
When?
Title last year or the year
Oh,
before.
no, that was like 5 years ago.
It wasn't. It was a lovely present.
Well, I'm asking.
And I brought it. I think I brought it home.
I'm asking for us to each get, Amarin is checking to see if we can each get a copy this year. So, okay, so
Yeah.
elections is one of the priorities that we have. Did you have, wait, let's go back to Senator Collmore. Did you have other, I don't want to get into too much detail because we have a chairs meeting in 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
No, I'm fine. I again, the laser focus for me was on COVID stuff and making sure that we deal with whatever we can do to help people and businesses. So I don't have a whole list of things I'd like to see going.
Well, and know that we don't, just because something isn't on our list doesn't mean we won't be taking it up.
That's true.
Senator Clarkson?
So I think everything that's been mentioned to date, I would support, and were on my list. The things that we haven't mentioned yet are the lessons learned. We had some very specific lessons learned. I'd love to hear from VLCT lessons learned. We learned, that we need to be really encouraging and incenting digitizing of a bunch of municipal records, not just land records, but lots of other things. So I'd love to explore the lessons learned. I'd love to look at really embedding into our statutes flexibility when we need it, and what would trigger that kind of flexibility. I would not be So anyway, I'd love to do something around lessons learned and have a lessons learned bill.
We have, Tucker is prepared, Tucker is working on that, and the way we're going to do it, I think, is he's going to bring us the bill that we passed last year. And then we're going to modify it and make changes and other things that we've learned, and we'll have a committee bill.
Right. The other thing I want to make sure we do soon is our constitutional amendment proposal and get that done. I would also would like to support the chair's pet bill on municipal on the pilots. And I think that that also got stuck in the House, and I'd love to revisit that. And I think that may be my, and I'd just like to reinforce the racial equity work that it not only, I'd love to, we're going to hear from Susanna, I know, but it's not just expanding her staff because she is overwhelmed. She is now on every conceivable panel, and her time is just split. So she, you know, we can't divide her enough. Everybody wants her. It's not just her time and staff, but it's also what she's finding out and what's our responsibility moving some of that forward. Some of it's in our committee, some isn't, but systemic racism, it means systemic to state government. At least that's the initial charge. And I think that we want to see what she is, you know, make sure we address her recommendations thus far in terms as it applies to our committee.
She didn't say she was overwhelmed. What she said very nicely was she was sufficiently whelmed.
So she is way polite, and
I know. So Senator Rahm, have you given some thought to priorities in this committee?
Well, I have, but please stop me if these belong somewhere else, because I think my big overarching concerns and bills I'm thinking about have to do with essentially how government operates in a systemic way. And I would break that down into two major categories. One is systemic demographic data collection. You know, we saw with the experience in the pandemic how important it was to understand from a racial, age, and other perspective how the infection rate was affecting, and what we learned was it's particularly affecting Black Vermonters. I just learned, we just got some data on unemployment, and it was very stark about women accessing 70% of unemployment. And then I said, okay, great, can you send me the racial data? And 97% of respondents, they have no racial data. So I believe that might be a federal problem to be getting federal funds and not have sufficient demographic data that you're collecting. So I don't know where standardized demographic data collection fits in, but I think it's just so critical for all of our work, and underscores, Madam Chair, what you said yesterday about making sure we're hearing the most underserved voices. Often data can tell that story and help us paint that picture. The other major concern I have is about standardized language access in the state. Once upon a time, I helped write a language access plan for the city of Burlington. Winooski's working on one, et cetera. But many states have started to standardize that, particularly so that emergency operations and life-saving information has a standard protocol for how it's interpreted and shared. I can't imagine not having credible life-saving information in your own language from a state government official for 2 to 3 weeks, which has been a lot of the experience in the pandemic. So those are two of my really overarching passions and concerns right now. I'm really grateful to hear everybody talking about, racial justice issues broadly, and law enforcement, and redistricting. I mean, they're all on my list too, but I just have these really big kind of meta concerns about how government might be leaving people behind and how we standardize some of those processes.
Yeah, I think that whenever we do anything, we need to look at how we collect the data for that. And Bryn, around the data for law enforcement, Bryn Hare is going to be working with us on that issue because it belongs in here, but she's also assigned to judiciary. So she's going to be working with us on that. So I
And may I just add to Keisha, I think that your interest fits right in also with government accountability, which Brian is Brian's baby still. I think, Brian, aren't you our rep on government accountability? Or is Jeanette on that also?
Both of us.
We both.
So both of you are on that, and doesn't that fit? Of course, that fits right in with that.
There, to speak to that, there, I think that, and I don't know that Brian agrees with me on this, but there has been some talk about looking at the role of the Government Accountability Committee now and seeing if maybe it needs to expand and become more of an oversight committee and not that's as far as I have this conversation, but I think that it is worth having the discussion. And Brian and I have just had a tiny bit of it. We haven't really talked about it at all, but that would be this committee that would work on anything like that.
Thanks.
So
well, I'm in the right place. So good.
So I don't really have anything else, I don't think, around that, except that we want to start hearing about the, as Brian pointed out, how the COVID money impacted the areas that are of concern to us, that are in our purview, and then what kind of money might be available for those areas in the new one. And we're going to hear about that on Friday. And then we'll start talking to individual people like EMS and law enforcement and state employees, and about how it impacted them and what they may need going forward. So, we will be taking up, I know everybody is going to be so excited about this. We will be
Vital records?
Huh?
Vital records?
Oh, let's do it. No.
I have a doctor's appointment that day.
The Cannabis Bill.
Yep.
There is a cannabis, it is legal now. We have passed it. There's some issues around the board appointments. They have not yet been made. There is the question of opt-in and opt-out and how that happens and when. So Michelle Child is going to be joining us because it is now not an issue of should we do it or not, but now it's how does the government address it and the operations of the government around it. So I know that's going to be coming up.
I was wondering if that was going to come back to this committee or not.
Yep, it will.
Because there's also the issues around the access to minority people of color and whatnot, wanting access to the industry more, and small farmers and whatnot.
Well,
I don't know if that will come here.
There is a bill, and I don't want to get into it now, but the Cannabis Board is going to be doing a lot of that. I mean, that it already is, a lot of that is in the bill. It just isn't defined as well as some people would like it defined. So, but I'm just going to make one comment about, because Senator Rahm mentioned that I had sent out this letter, and I sent it out. My concern is that a lot of the issues we deal with could have significant racial impacts, because we deal with data collection and law enforcement and all of those kinds of issues. And so anything we do could have significant racial impact. And we heard a lot last session, don't do anything to us without us. But I'm not in a position to know exactly who the us is. And I'm just going to be pretty straightforward here and say this. And if I step on anybody's toes, I'm sorry. But I am not the person to say who the us is that needs to be heard from. So what I've done is I worked with Eitan. I don't know if you know Eitan. What in the world is his last name? Nesferez. So he's the governor's appointee to the RDA, the Law Enforcement Racial Advisory Board. And
yeah, he's testified with us.
Yes, and he now is working with the Department of Public Safety. Anyway, I worked with him on how to best do this. And so what I've done is I've composed a letter, and I'll send it to all you committee members so that you can see it. I've composed a letter with his help that says, you are representatives and advocates. We know who you are, but we don't know who those other voices are in your communities. And we don't have, or I don't have the ability to know who those voices are. So what I've done is asked, I think I sent it to 18 or 19 people. And I sent it to all the members of the Racial Equity Advisory Panel and the NAACP, and Eitan and Mark Hughes and Keisha and Coach and a lot of people who have been spokespersons, and asked them to, when issues come up that might have significant racial impact, to let us know who the people are that we should be hearing from. It might be them, or it might be somebody else. It might be a person who isn't acknowledged as an advocate or a representative of a community, but is thought of in that community as a thought leader, somebody who knows what goes on the ground level with people. So I have sent that out, and we will see the response that we get. And I hope that people thought that was a reasonable thing to do. But I did not want to take the responsibility for saying we're only going to hear from and send invites to those people who are either given leadership by somebody, by communities, or who have assumed leadership because of their personalities. So I just wanted you to know that I've done that.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I just want to say, Jeanette, I really applaud that. I think it's really brave, and just be prepared for it to be messy, just like when a lot of people are focused on an issue and they haven't had a lot of experience in the State House, it can be really jarring to enter into our culture and process, and we'll just need to be really patient and forgiving and thoughtful around that. And we're, I'm so heartened we're doing that work with the Social Equity Caucus to sort of help people understand the timing and the nature of our process. And so I really applaud that. And I think the one thing that could help complement that is better data collection, so they don't feel like they, really have to be a full representative or spokesperson of a very non-monolithic group of people that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I don't think I would be asking them to represent necessarily anybody except their own position, just like we ask. I mean, we had people who weren't used to being in the State House when we did the massage therapy bill. And we had, I think we heard from, I added it up once, and it was either 59 or 60 people that testified to us on that bill. So I think we handled it reasonably well. We were in the State House at the time, so it was a little bit different, but we'll just have to kind of play it by ear. And I think that, so I just wanted to make sure that people understood that we are trying to reach out to the different communities. And so there it is.
So,
Senator Clarkson.
So to that end, I've been serving on the Social Equity Caucus Task Force, and there are recommendations that they will be making on certain government, on certain functions. And as I review that report, it may be appropriate that some of those are appropriately in our committee. And maybe we could set aside some time to actually review some of those. Keisha, what do you think of that? I mean, because I think that report is going to have some very specific recommendations on how to be more inclusive in certain areas in government, and
And I imagine this committee heard the racial equity task force report that Susanna worked.
No, we haven't yet.
Okay.
She just,
Nope.
we're going to hear it next week.
Okay, yeah, maybe both at the same time, so it's clear where there's common themes and overlap or some contrast. But I think, yeah, both of those are really valuable. People have worked really hard on those sets of recommendations, and I would agree. I think that's great for our community.
yeah, and that group, Jeanette, includes a wide range of those voices.
Yeah, no, I realize that. I just want to make sure that we get invites and we allow people to come in when we're dealing with issues that, so that's.
I think the one other thing I would say to be, thoughtful around for all legislators is sometimes our style of questioning can be necessarily kind of interrogatory. We're really trying to get to the heart of something. And if someone's new to the State House, as you've experienced with lots of other groups, that can be really jarring and it can break trust. And they can feel like, well, they're not really curious about my experience. And this is a really hard format for me to share who I really am. And so it's just that reminder to legislators as well, that if people are telling you really hard things about their experience in Vermont, it's a gift. And it's one that's really hard to give, especially publicly. And we want to make sure we keep inviting that so they keep feeling safe doing that. And that's our work as well.
Mm-hmm. So anything else, committee, here that we should be talking about before we jump over to or I jump over? So tomorrow, I guess we're going to vote out the town meeting bill. Hi, Isabel. Is it time for you to go out?
Oh, Isabel is making her timely appearance.
Oh, I know. And then,
Really?
did you wonder who Isabel was?
No, it was her second attempt, and my dog was behind me before I was trying to get them to meet, but my dog doesn't care as much about me.
I particularly like Isabel's eyebrows.
Okay, I have to leave because I'm due at chair's meeting now, but you can continue if you want to, but I'm going to leave. So thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
See you tomorrow.
See you soon.